The first thing that I want you to know is the fact that I'm not watching Formscape's video, because I don't agree with Formscapes, and I think that conspiracy theory bullshit is just that. Conspiracy theory bullshit. And the second thing that I think it's very important that you know is the fact that I agree with Professor Dave. There should be the latent assumption that I actually do foundationally agree with Professor Dave. So watching and reacting to the video that I'm watching and reacting to is purely my attempt at deconstructing and rearranging what Professor Dave is attempting to explain. Point number one, I believe that the two of you live in two fundamentally different realities.
The replication crisis can be traced back to research published in 2011 by the Cornell University social psychologist Daryl Bim, within which Bim alleged to have produced experimental evidence suggestive of extrasensory perception. Unsurprisingly, Bim was viciously criticized for this research, and in an effort to discredit his findings, Bim's critics highlighted what they regarded as serious methodological flaws in his research. Essentially, these criticisms amounted to the claim that the statistical methods used by Bim in analyzing his data were inadequate. Yet, as Bim pointed out in his response to his critics, the supposed flaw in his research was in fact common practice within psychological, medical, and sociological research in general. If Bim's parapsychological findings were to be thrown out on those methodological grounds, then an enormous amount of psychological, medical, and sociological research would need to be thrown out as well for the exact same reasons.
That's right. All published science is wrong and dumb, which means that pseudoscience that can't manage to get published must be right.
First of all, Dave deGrasse Tyson, what the fuck are you talking about? That's a completely random assertion that does nothing to help your argument. You flash a paragraph on the screen that shows that it's mathematically unlikely that any and all failed replicability could have come from bias. But probability is unintuitive to the average person, because probability, statistics, and math as a whole is not founded in reality. To reiterate, it is a type of philosophy. Math is what happens when you take these metaphysical objects and try to do absolute logical computation with them. None of that is founded in reality, which means you have a lot of not quite intuitive mental structures that can run into each other at fucking the speed of light and cause a whole bunch of problems. You could have very easily refuted Formscapes by showing that whatever his fucking name was, that ESP guy, his methods were questionable and his refutation didn't make sense. But instead, you somehow asserted that Formscapes wanted ESP to be real. You got completely distracted. Like, what are we talking about? And to be clear once more, when I say you didn't show anything, I don't mean for the fact that you actually showed pieces of paper with uninterpretable text, or harder to interpret text. Because you did. You showed pieces of paper that definitely said some things, but refused to elaborate on what those pieces of paper actually said. Like everybody that was in the audience was just in the know. Except I'm not. We are at a fast food minimum wage fucking job. I do not understand how to read this stuff. You want me to not be fooled, yes? So please tell me what's going on. Like, don't just show me this text. Don't show me this esoteric ass text and then get distracted by the fucking ESP bullshit, okay? You understand what I'm trying to say. Don't act like you don't understand what I'm trying to say. Hey, so why does this thing work? Oh, because it works. Girl, what? I just asked, why does this thing work? I can show you how it works. That's not what I'm asking. Why does this thing work? Because it's never not worked before. Okay, right. So the foundations of your assumptions about reality are induced and not deduced? What's the difference? Listen, that is you two. My hand puppets are how confusing both of you sound, trying and failing to talk to each other. Okay, so point number 2. I think that owning science itself is a ridiculous concept. I think that institutions that are built for profit should be, if not dismantled regularly, at the very least constantly challenged and rearranged regularly. I'm also of the belief that owning many things is stupid. One of the first and foremost things that you will discover about me time and time again is the idea that I definitely do not like this current mode of production. Do I have any better ideas? Kinda, sorta. I really do tend to think of it like the music industry, you know? I don't think that everyone in the music industry is inherently good-natured. I think that's actually really naive to think in that way. The people of the Michael Jackson estate. If I make a cover of a Michael Jackson song, that money's not going to Michael fucking Jackson. That motherfucker's dead. In the same sense, when that son of a bitch was alive, he owned the Beatles discography. What the hell does that mean? What does that mean? Like, I know what that means from a business standpoint, but what does that mean for the world of music? That Michael Jackson owns the Beatles estate? There's just this inherent latent process through which science is owned and profited off of that I think is bad. I think that science should be a public good. Do I have any sort of model or system that actually makes sense that could work for the hundreds of millions of people that'll become homeless or jobless without our current system? No. But I am aware enough to be able to question that system, like,
The second problem is that universities and other research organizations don't have enough funds to subscribe to the expanding bulk of journals, so we are left with a Darwinian race for survival. The best journals are subscribed to, and the others are ignored or accessed only when researchers want to purchase one specific article. It is not an ideal world, but it works. To suggest that this shows corruption in science, or even that this constitutes a racket, is extremely irresponsible. The process of reliable scientific publication costs money to provide, so it costs money to consume. It's like complaining that Netflix isn't free. They need money to make the content, so they charge you to watch it.
And by the way, a particularly manipulative pedant would absolutely hound you for that kind of weird Netflix analogy.
Nevertheless, they are legitimate problems, and to address these problems, free access journals have arisen. Here, scientists and publishers work for free to disseminate their knowledge, but many of these journals are of mediocre quality and poorly refereed. Even in the major journals, the expensive ones, some articles are freely accessible. The author is usually required to pay a small fee to make their article accessible to everyone, and this is happening more and more.
So we agree, at the very least, we agree that it's a problem. What this video is essentially is attempting and failing to refute a conspiracy theory because it's constantly being distracted by the pseudoscience. There's very clearly the foundations of a conspiracy theory laid that is never quite refuted. You show that Robert Maxwell couldn't actually possibly have had that much influence on the science industry, but you don't actually prove that he doesn't. Now, actually, now I'm going to criticize myself because the phrasing of my argument is poor as well. The burden of proof should be on Formscapes because he's the one making the outstanding claim that Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine Maxwell, has all of this racketeering energy in the first place. But the claim was made. And if it's refutable, you could have refuted it. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't so much as you're wrong, but really just that the argument that you made wasn't as strong as it could be. Just for some clarity as to what I was attempting to say this morning, not that the point was clearly refutable or irrefutable, but instead that the conspiratorial claim is generally unfalsifiable. So you could have just said that. This is an unfalsifiable claim. You could have just pointed out that there was a conspiracy theory being built and that it's unfalsifiable. You're making hearsay arguments. There's a way you could have constructed an argument that wouldn't have been distracted by the ESP bullshit. But you were distracted, so. I'm at work now, so I have to continue filming this video while on the clock. I'm actually not on the clock. Hold on. Not on the clock. I'm filming it while on my break. Anyways, point 3. Science is reliant on math to justify it, but math is not reliant on science to justify it. There are forms of math that are being discovered today, as they have been continuously, that may or may not have an application in whole swaths of scientific fields. Absolute logic does not rely on the physical world in order for it to be as absolute as it is. Technology and engineering are first and foremost a collection of the most efficient tools that we can use to manipulate the world around us. Engineering discards all that which is least efficient. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not real, but it just means that it's not as useful as this other tool that we have that's way more efficient. Discarding everything that isn't immediately found to be as useful as possible is bad science, not only because it's bad math, but simply because it's bad science, right? Instead, it seems like we have this sort of system where we try to collect as many bits of information that we can agree on in order to have some sort of common language. And then we discard all other language that we either can't agree on or that we can't find use for in our immediate environment. I don't think I'm able to fully express to you how horrible your language learning metaphor is. You compared science education to that of language learning, and you specifically used French, which is funny as hell, considering there is an Academy of French that has an agreed upon standard of French. These people in France, they are French, and they speak the language of France, which is French. They have an academy and everything. And then all this other discarded language that is still definitely French in Africa, in South America, hell, in North America, like Louisiana, New Orleans, the Canadians. All this French is just discarded from the French that you're supposed to learn. Which is, that doesn't, there's so much information that's missing. Like, to give your metaphor credit where credit is due, of course, I feel as if I'm making somewhat of a straw man of your language metaphor. Obviously, if you want to learn a dialect of French, you can just go out and learn a dialect of French. It's not like these dialects are forbidden or anything. And of course, it's important to understand the basic grammar and basic syntax and the basic morphology of French as a general language. That way, when you do go out and learn all these pidgins and creoles and dialects of French that were created by all these colonized people, you have a better understanding of not just French, but really how language works as a mental model. The only real problem with the metaphor is that there's no actual room for invention or innovation. Ideas aren't seen as things that can connect with each other hyper-relationally, but instead as things built from foundations. You have to have the foundational knowledge. That only works if the scientific method is our best method yet for sussing out the truth about physical reality, which it is. And rather than making that the foundation of your argument, you nitpicked this man's use of stock footage. Oh my god, that is insufferable. Oh my god. Jesus Christ, Professor Dave, you are stressing me out. You are essentially having a conversation about how language is supposed to be used, how it's important, how it's useful, and how it needs to be wielded responsibly, lest we hurt each other through ignorance. The conversation that Formscapes is having is about the nature of language itself and why it exists in the first place. Not how it's useful, but why it exists in the first place. And so the only way to combat Formscapes on his turf is to deconstruct why that kind of conversation is impractical, pointless, meaningless, and harmful for the state of science and for the state of knowledge in general. There's a point in this video where you and Formscapes, and I cannot stress this enough, literally say the exact same thing, and yet for some reason, you both believe that you're disagreeing with each other, which is fucking crazy. Take a look at this diagram and you'll see that there's a center of this diagram and then outer circles of this diagram. We had an original concept, natural selection, that was then challenged and updated with new, more accurate, and yet also more detailed information about the nature of evolution. The only difference in your perspectives is that you believe this to be from the foundation to the top of the mountain, whereas Formscapes is saying that it more so spread out, that we started with a general idea of evolution, and then we spread out into a super detailed concept of evolution, like a ball that grows texture. So when you pulled that diagram into the video, I literally thought that you were just fucking with me. Like, I literally thought you were just fucking with the viewer. Like, that's literally what Formscapes is talking about in the video. And then you go on to assert that he's denying evolution, when in no part of the video did Formscapes ever say that evolution was inherently wrong, or an incorrect perspective. To be clear, what I'm actually saying is no part in your video did you show a clip of him actually denying evolution. He could have actually denied evolution in the original video, but I'm not watching his original video because it's conspiratorial hogwash. So I'm not consuming that. So technically, what he said, the idea that challenging evolution is harder now, is technically true. He did not know why. You could have just told him why, but instead you wasted a bunch of time calling him stupid over and over and over again. That is insufferable. Formscape's essential gripe with foundational knowledge is that having knowledge be the foundation of something doesn't inherently make it true, which is true. Like, evolution isn't true simply because you can build a bunch of ideas on top of it and those ideas don't immediately shatter on impact. Evolution is true because it was tested, because it was observed in reality. That's what makes it true. It's not true because it's the foundation of all this information that you can then have access to, right? But that's how that's how it's taught. Evolution in its natural form can't be observed, but it can be deduced, which is what makes it true. You can look at all the different puzzle pieces and logically deduce that natural selection and evolution and all these other forms of whatever the fucking diagram said, Evo Devo, all that stuff is true. Really fucking cool. You could have just made that argument, but instead, you just spent time calling him stupid. So, number one, you two live in two different universes, practically. Two different languages, two different realities, and you make little to no effort to actually bridge the gap. You box this person away as, what, ontologically evil? Which, funnily enough, leads to you outright mishearing or misinterpreting really basic, logically sound arguments. Number two, in terms of owning scientific research or scientific innovation, your strongest argument, or really just the strongest statement in that section, was the fact that, oh, these people deserve to make a living too. And I'm sure the people that were running the guillotines way back in the day in France deserved to make a living as well. But we can agree that cutting people's heads off is a little barbaric, yeah? The ability to own and profit off of science is inherently absurd. Number three, I like to believe that Formscapes is Pythagorean in a way, with the whole perfect ratios and perfect proportions, numbers and their relations. I have come to the conclusion that Formscapes believes that the universe is holistically generated. This is to say that the universe can be holistically derived through logic alone. This is not true. Fundamentally, this isn't true. In observed reality, the universe has a speed limit. Why is that? Science is not built to answer whys. It simply tells you what things are. The definition of reality is simply what is real, which is to say, what we can affect, what can be related to, not what can be imagined or what can be possible. That is the realm of fiction. But it is also the realm of philosophy. It's the realm of spirituality, but it's also the realm of math. And science needs math in order to justify it, because it is the only purely logical language that can, if not remove bias, be as close as to removed from human bias as we can possibly get it. So I'm going to end this video by reading the tail end of a comment that I left on Professor Dave's original video about 8 months ago, and I hope you can understand where I'm actually going with it. Philosophy, for the most part, is the pigeon shitting on the chessboard. Reality is cluttered and hard to measure, except in certain cases that you control. But the control is part of the observed issue. You never really address that. It's silly and absurd that Formscapes can shit on the chessboard, and most of their video makes no sense outside of this grand gesture to a conspiracy that I'll trust is absolute hogwash. But why are we playing on a chessboard in the first place? Formscapes isn't playing your game, and you're really easy to rage bait. Axiomatic thinking isn't dogmatic, but I do worry about how local our laws of physics might be. I like to think that we live in a bendy, messy universe, and that when we develop ways to travel it, we'll discover laws of physics no one could ever believe. We probably won't get to that point anywhere in our lifetimes, but it's fun to write about. World Star. World Star.